We're super glad to have you all here today, and I am very, very pleased to introduce our guest webinar speaker today. She's coming to us live from Israel. She is an international speaker, the co-founder and CEO of Enkindle Global, an organization that cultivates personal well-being to bring about social well-being. She is the author of the book, Burning Out Won't Get You There, Davida Ginter. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for this warm welcome, Lorelai. It's a pleasure being here today.
It's a pleasure having you here today. I know that all of us are online and super interested to learn about how we can avoid burnout and keep well-being at the forefront of our personal and professional lives so we can go out there and crush it. So take it away.
Absolutely. So thank you again for this invitation, and I'm happy to be here today. First, because I'm happy to interact with people about this topic, but also because I'm always grateful for the opportunity to open up a conversation about burnout, because it sometimes could be very unspoken. So part of our purpose is basically to open up a bold conversation about burnout. And I'm going to share a little bit about myself and how did I get to do what I'm doing to give you a context, and then we're going to dive into the content. Let me just share my screen with you. So, and yeah, I believe you can see my screen now. So, burnout, how did I get to work with this interesting topic? I've been working with leaders and change makers for about a decade now in the field of sustainability and bringing about social change. And while doing that, I noticed so many of the people I'm working with, leaders, change makers, entrepreneurs, activists, CEOs, going through these different phases from stressing out all the way to hitting the wall of burnout. And I got very curious to understand, why is this happening? Why do the people who care so much about everyone and everything else, other people, the environment, entire communities, how come those people forget or neglect this bit of self-care when they care so much for other people? How come that we push towards sustainability, but we forget to sustain ourselves? And so I got to start exploring that, and I've interviewed people from all over the world. I was curious again to understand if it's different from one country to another, from one continent to another. And I came to realize that it's basically everywhere. And this is how the book was born, Burning Out Won't Get You There, which is basically a collection of all the stories being shared with me, and all the wisdom was generally given to me by those people that I had conversations with. And a few interesting things came up. First, let's see if I can switch this slide here. Oh, yeah. So when I talk with people about well-being, people love it, they are excited about it. We all want more well-being into our lives, right? But it doesn't evoke them as strong feelings as the word burnout does. So as I said, burnout is basically everywhere. I realized it's not just leaders and change makers. It's cross-cultural and cross-sectoral. You can find it in all industries, in all roles. It's a big and wide phenomenon. And it's also very emotional. It's attached to the emotional roller coaster that we are sometimes going through. And this is, again, what I found out, that we can notice and observe burnout everywhere at different stages. But also that it's rooted in so many of our day-to-day life. Take a look at this, for example, and I promise this is the last piece of data I'm going to show today, just to give you a clear picture. Look, for example, at this number. People have been asked, how many of you feel burnt out? And 58, look at the light gray line, 58% of the people who were asked about burnout felt exhausted or burnt out. But even more than that, 65% of the people replied that they are feeling stressed. But what I'm really concerned about is this number, the 25% of the people who said, I will not be able to keep up the current pace of work. And this is concerning because the numbers below the 65, the 58 is the people who suffer burnout today. The 25 who cannot keep up like that, potentially they are the next one to be burnt out if we don't prevent it on time. So this is exactly our purpose, to intervene, to prevent it on time, to bring more well-being into our lives, which is of course the other side of the same coin of burnout. So why is this happening? If we take a look at the causes of burnout, and I promise we'll get to the well-being and the practices, but let's understand the problem first, the issue. So the first thing and the most common one we see is that people get so busy. But it's a question, are we busy because we have a lot to do and there's workload? Well, not only. What happens is that it's a business mindset. So we correlate being busy with being successful and working hard. This is research-based. So basically, we perceive it as if we're not busy, we are lazy, or we are failing, or worse, we are a failure, so it's attached to our identity. So basically, we use business to hide from the fear of failure, which is, of course, very sad, but also it's a question of this mind shift. Now, take this feeling of busyness and add more layers into that. For example, like we said, the fear to fail or to be a failure, or the guilt and shame attached to that, because oftentimes when people get stressed out and then burned out, and these are not the same, I'm going to touch upon that in a minute, they also feel guilty and ashamed about it. So they don't necessarily openly share that. And that means also that people feel alone in that. So add the ingredient of loneliness. But when we do that, when we don't openly talk about our struggles, our challenges, not only we get burned out, we are also don't receive the help and support that we need. So we keep, going in this loop of feeling burnt out, but also guilt, shame, and alone. Now add to that the comparison. So perhaps comparison is something very natural that we all do, but in the era that we live in of social media and everything is available and it looks like everyone is successful but us, right? We look at the feed, everyone seems to nailing it all the time. And of course, this is not the reality, but it gets to us. So again, we feel like we are falling behind. How come is everyone so successful and we are stressed out? And then obviously it's a highway to burnout. Now I want to say a word about the difference between stress and being burnt out. Stress by itself is not a bad thing. Stress, research has shown, could actually be motivating because it releases the adrenaline, it can push us forward, etc. However, when stress is not being managed well, or when it's chronic, when it's not something that happens every once in a while at peak times, but we feel it every day, then it's not managed well, it's not balanced way, and then we are moving from being stressed every now and then to being stressed all the time. And then the next phase, if we can again paint this line, it's not really linear, but in that case it goes like that. Then we are overwhelmed, then we are anxious, and then we hit the wall of burnout if we don't prevent it on time. So our purpose is to identify this stress and intervene there and prevent it by integrating more well-being into our daily lives. So I would say that one of the first keys, the most important things we can do is to openly admit what we are going through. So admitting our challenges and struggles is actually not a weakness, it's courage. Many people that I talked with and interact with, by the way, especially entrepreneurs, business owners, afraid to admit those struggles because it could appear as weakness because they're afraid to lose credibility, maybe their investors or clients. But actually, and I think we know it at some level, actually when we are being open up, we can receive the help, and also other people look at it as authenticity. It's relatable. We all struggle. No one said that, leadership is being mistakes proof. Another key, obviously, to prevent burnout is that bit that I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, which is the bit of self-care. So again, it's that perception of when we take self-care, it's egoistic, right? It's laziness, right? Wrong. It's not egoistic to take care of ourselves. It's actually not even counterproductive, because when we take good care of ourselves, we gain our energy back. So we regain our energy and we are more productive and more creative and can be at service for others. It's like the old analogy to the airplanes, right? Put your oxygen mask on first, because if you want to assist others, you need your oxygen, you need your strength and your energy. So obviously taking self-care is not about being lazy or egoistic. It's so important. If you need to allocate time for self-care during your day, go ahead and do it. Maybe it's against what we were taught and being, educated and the social norms. It doesn't mean that this is how it should be. So what are the costs of not taking self-care? Take a look at that. Energy depletion, exhaustion, dysfunction in the long run. What is this exhaustion? So I don't know if you've ever noticed people who actually have good night's sleep. They sleep 7-8 hours a night and they still wake up very tired every day. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that they don't get enough sleep. It means emotional tiredness, emotional exhaustion that translates into something physical. What is this dysfunction in the long run? It means that now if we're boosting ourselves and being energized, but tomorrow we're going to go back to the same routine of lacking self-care and well-being, obviously will not be functioning in the long run. Now, on the good news, sort of, is that there is now a worldwide recognition to burnout. So in May 2019, the World Health Organization recognized burnout for the first time as a syndrome, and they defined it as a syndrome results from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is exactly that. So burnout is not depression. We need to separate the two. Maybe the symptoms are like, I've spoken with people who got through severe burnout and they afterwards just stayed in bed for 2 months. Seriously, happens several times to several people I've been talking with about burnout. But burnout by itself is not a clinical depression. It is definitely in the context of work. By the way, not only paid work, it could be volunteering, it could be any mission that you carry, any project, but it is related to your mission and something that you work on. And as we said before, stress that has not been managed well. And the World Health Organization also recognizes a list of signs that we can observe and know if someone, perhaps ourselves or someone of our colleagues or maybe friends, is going through burnout, which are feeling of energy depletion or exhaustion, which we have mentioned, but also increased distance from your job. Maybe you feel negative or cynical towards what you do, or your colleagues, or your boss. And finally, of course, reduced professional efficacy and productivity. And I will add to that, from what I've noticed, reduced creativity and innovation. So again, taking this time for self-care, it basically is rewarded so well in so many areas. So now what? Where do we go from here? What do we do to actually avoid, prevent burnout on time? Well, we all love to go to a vacation, right? So many times retreats are the ultimate answer. We work hard and then we go to a vacation of a week or two, we come back energized, probably some tan from the sun, we are happy. And then after a day, or maybe 2 days, or maybe a week, we go back to the same routine, doing more of the same again. And it has solved nothing. So I have nothing against retreats, obviously, or vacations. I love holidays. It's not that. But it's not addressing the root problems, the root issues. So we need to do something different. We need to integrate more well-being into our routines by practices, approaches. I'm going to describe a few in a minute. But the first thing I'm going to say is that I'm always asked, so what's your solution to preventing burnout? What is your formula? What is your recipe? Give us a recipe. And I say, no solution, sorry. First, because there's no single solution. There's not one. There's a variety of practices, approaches, hands-on exercises, shifts of the mindset. I'm going to specify a few of those, I promise. But just to say there are so many, there's no single solution. Second, there's no one size that fits all. This is very, very important. Why? Because if we are doing something just because someone else told us to do that suits them but doesn't suit us, it's even more stressful and more harmful. For example, it seems like, I don't know, everyone is meditating, right? So trendy. Maybe I don't want to meditate. Maybe I can't meditate. Maybe it's not for me. It's not serving me well. So the best thing to do basically is do your inner exploration. Yeah, go and read and listen to those different ideas and practices, but then choose carefully what works for you. Test it and try it and observe yourself. And if it serves you well, that's great, implement it. And if not, just move on. Do your inner exploration, what works for you. What could balance your routine to be less stressed and thrive. But another key advice here would be consistency. Because if we are doing that, just like New Year's resolution, right? If we're doing that for a short time, and then we kind of slowly sliding back to our routines, it won't last. And we are talking about a long-lasting change that we want to implement. So be consistent with what you have chosen to implement. I'm gonna share with you now the most interesting bits of my research, again, given to me by so many people out there that have shared what works for them. So I kept asking, okay, so after you have learned, after you have come out from your burnout, what would you do different? What works for you to maintain well-being? And what I give here, again, is not a recipe. It's more like a menu divided into sections, just like in my book. So what could work? And for some of them, I'm going to specify. For some of them, we're going to run really quick because we don't have a lot of time. But of course, you can always read more after. So the first category or section would be our mindset. What can we do to change a bit our mindset to prevent burnout or to cultivate well-being? And this is related to, for example, learning how to lean into hard, difficult emotions instead of denying them. So I deliberately don't say negative or positive emotions. They're just emotions. But some emotions are more difficult to carry. Fear, frustration, anger. So a great practice would be to learn how to deal with them and even lean into this fear instead of denying that it's even happening. And another practice under mindset could be openly sharing what you are going through, and we have mentioned that before. And another one would be empathy and self-empathy. I want to pause here for a minute and say something about self-empathy. So the way I see it, self-empathy is accepting yourself as you are. I've talked with people who told me openly, I felt I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough on time. I felt that I am not enough. This is again attached to our identity. So the way to come around it would be to employ self-empathy and accept what you are and what you can give and do at this moment. So if there's one thing actually that I would like you to take from today, we haven't finished, but still one very important thing would be pause that self-judgment. Self-empathy, pause that self-judgment. You are enough. When you feel you're not enough, it's a highway to burnout. We need to pause that judgment. Another category would be daily practices. So this is everything to do with contemplative practices, everything that grounds us, everything that basically help us regain balance. Again, I can't hand you the solutions because maybe you're working alone all day in front of your screen, so your way to balance that would be to socialize in the evening, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's very hectic and noisy all day long and you need to block the noise in your free time. So your practice would be to go outdoors and get some peace and quiet, or maybe do some activities. It differs from one person to another, but any practice that helps you thrive, feel good, feel well, be at peace with yourself. It could be moving, it could be gratitude, it could be journaling. Contemplative practices, embed them into your routine, test and try and see what serves you well. And another category would be approaches to life. And this is about basically authenticity and courage and the art of admitting a failure. Like we said before, we are afraid to admit our failures, but this is a fine art we can learn. Whom we can share with our failures, in which settings, how to do it in a safe and trustful environment. A word about authenticity and courage, and what does it have to do even with preventing burnout? I know it could be surprising. It was surprising for me. When I started writing about it, I thought, what am I doing? Why am I writing about authenticity? But here's what I came to realize. When you find your inner voice, and when you learn to vocalize that, and when you practice stand up for what you believe in, and be yourself, be authentic self, then you are way more connected to yourself and to others. So you regain this connection and you regain your identity, your true self. And that by itself keeps you resilient and helps you majorly to prevent burnout. Seriously, this has been something that has been working for me. At times I was stressed. I realized I can't speak my truth, and it was very helpful for me to practice that and learn to stand up for what I believe in. And I feel way more prepared to deal with those challenges. Another category here would be connecting. I think it's self-explanatory, but still it's so important to remind ourselves to connect with others, to reach out for friendship, for support, for empathy, for help, maybe for advice. Maybe you don't need advice. Maybe you just want to be heard. Connect with other people, friends, colleagues, mentors. Mentors that I've interviewed told me, yeah, we like people approaching us. Sometimes people shy away from approaching to someone they haven't met or spoken with before, but mentors do love it. Why? Because they feel valued. So connect to other people, find your tribes, find your communities to support you. And then we have liberation of heart, mind, and body. This is basically, I love that one. This is basically about creativity, embracing a childlike mindset. So we sometimes forget how to be like children, how to be playful. But imagine that your routine, whatever it is that you're doing, work, life, parenting, leading, whatever, imagine more creativity. Imagine it's more playful and more colorful and you're having fun, it's enjoyable. Yeah, you still have the hard work to do, but it's way more enjoyable when you play with it, when you create with it. So find your ways to be more creative and playful. And lastly, alignment with a meaningful cause. So yeah, people can get burnt out while they're working for a meaningful cause because they're very passionate about what they do and they don't set those self-boundaries. But there are also people, maybe even the majority, who get burnt out because they feel disconnected from what they are doing. So what I would suggest here as a practice is to keep checking, do this checking every now and then. Do you still feel aligned with what you do? Do you feel it's meaningful? Do you feel it meets your core values? If not, you might need to change something there. And it takes courage again and authenticity again. As you can notice, these are connecting. I want to invite you now to do something. We have just a few more minutes before the Q&A, but I want to invite you for a short practice. Because as much as we all love talking, and like I said, open up the conversation, we need to practice. We need to get into actions. So how do we make it practical? I want to invite you to take a minute, think about it. Which step can you take now or tomorrow morning? Practical step to increase your personal well-being. I want you to take a minute, think about it, something very tangible that you can do. And please share it with us in the chat if you want to. This is an invitation, you don't have to share it. What's more important for you, think for a second and write down for yourself. Which practical step can you take as of now, tomorrow, to enhance your well-being? And if you want, please share it in the chat. Okay. So I hope some ideas for practices are bubbling there. And I want to invite you to think of another question. And this one I will not gonna ask you to share. So this is for you and for you only. And be as honest as possible. What can help you maintain personal well-being? Quite a different question. Because oftentimes we make decisions. From tomorrow morning, I don't know, I'm gonna learn to play the guitar. I've always wanted to. But I might not have the resources. I might not have the time or the support to do that. So this question is about what could help me implement the practice, start doing it tomorrow. What are those mechanisms that can help me take this practice, this decision into action? So take another minute to think. What can help you bridge that gap between the decision and the action? What support do you need? All right. Let's take a few more seconds to that. And I first want to thank you for doing that. You don't have to share, this is for you. But also to understand that while you're doing that, you start to be accountable for what you're doing. Maybe you want to find now, after we finish, maybe you want to find your accountability partner for that well-being. I know I have a good friend that whenever I feel a little stressed, I can talk with her, connect, but also to share my decisions for well-being, and she will keep me accountable for that. I trust her to be honest with me. So when you share your decisions, you are committing to yourself, you keep yourself accountable, but also the second question is about how can you make it a reality? How can you bridge that gap from decision into action? And then hopefully be consistent with that. So this was the part where we covered stress and burnout and everything in between, and the causes and the signs, but then also some practices that we can choose from and implement for ourselves. I want to invite you now for a part of questions. And before that, something as a reminder, before we wrap up that part, that whatever it is that you're doing, whatever mission that you are working on. Again, your personal life, your work, probably both. Burning out won't get you there. It will probably just hinder you. Well-being probably will. So thank you for that part. I'm gonna switch now to questions and your reflections. I'm gonna have Lorelai with me helping moderate. I want to invite you to bring up questions, but maybe also reflections and ideas. Maybe you just want to share your aha moments, whatever came to you. So this is an open invitation to basically interact now.
All right. Thank you so much for that. That was really wonderful and very insightful. We do have some questions coming in. For those of you who aren't aware, I launched a poll now. Go ahead and answer that survey when you have a quick second. Second, the Q&A button and the chat feature at the bottom middle of your screen. If you have questions for Davida, please send them over to us now and we'll get started. So first question for you. You mentioned kind of way back at the beginning about how people can still feel exhausted even if they're getting enough sleep. And you mentioned how it can do very much with emotional exhaustion. And that made me think of how a lot of people are expected or trained to do the emotional labor of others. Particularly women do the emotional labor of others. How do we set boundaries to take care of ourselves while maybe not putting up like hard barriers against other people to know that they can still communicate with us, but still keeping ourselves well?
I love that question because it's relatable. I'm guessing so many people now say, yeah, I've been there. I've interviewed one wonderful woman. She's a serial entrepreneur doing global scale projects. And when she described her burnout, and it was very emotional, it was very heavy, she told me that in hindsight, what got her to burnt out was that she didn't delegate the missions, so she kept holding all the responsibility on her shoulders, and that was her lesson learned. And what she shared, and also to that I would say, is that we need to learn how to let go. We need to let go of control. We need to let go of the idea that we can't mistake or can't ask for help from others, even if we are the leaders, even if we are expected to be the strongest and toughest person in the room. It doesn't mean that we can't delegate some of the responsibility. It doesn't mean that we can't let go of this control. So this is a practice. It's not a thing that could happen overnight, but it starts here first. The idea that we can share the load work or the burden or the responsibility with other people.
I like that. And I know that that will be difficult for a lot of people because we are trained and kind of expected to maintain control over our lives and our jobs, and asking for help is socialized to be seen as a form of weakness. So that kind of brings me to a question that we have about self-empathy that you talked about, self-empathy versus the judgment that we experience. Self-empathy is not taught normally, but judging others is very much socialized. We learn how to judge others pretty quickly. How do we pause that, which is so reinforced in society, and turn on the self-empathy button for ourselves much more often?
Yeah, beautiful. We can probably have another webinar just about that. But I would say that pausing self-judgment, when we teach that, we in my team, we go through this process of observation first. So we observe the situation, we pause there, and we are not in a hurry to make assumptions that lead to judgment. So we first pause and observe and see what's going on. We bring up questions. For example, could it be that this person is doing what is doing for a certain reason that we have not thought of, but also for ourselves? When we stop and observe, we can start asking ourselves honest and deep questions. Why am I feeling like that? what will happen if I will not do what I was expected to do, but I do it my way? What would happen if I take more time or receive more support? What would happen if I take another perspective? And when you start tapping into those honest questions, and you need to be willing to listen to the honest replies that will, bubble to the surface, then you are able to pause the judgment and embrace another way of thinking. And you start to accept who you are and the way that you are working on. And this is about the self-acceptance and the self-empathy in that way.
Okay. Quick reminder out there to everyone who's live that we have a survey going. Please take a minute to answer that survey. And Davida, I have a new question in asking about what do you do when burnout is not part of, burnout is a part of the company culture you work for?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I'm sure everybody's going, oh, yeah, I've been there.
Oh, yeah. First, let me share that this is a question that we are now dealing with as a team. Quick story that we have been working with individuals for a while. And then people kept coming and telling us, oh, this is all great. I can change my routine tomorrow morning and even be consistent. But then I go to work and it's the same workplace and this is how they treat me. This is a very honest question and I appreciate it. And the idea is to help change the organizational culture. However, not everything is within our control, right? Mm-hmm. So to that, I will reply. Open communication as much as possible. If you can, I don't know the specific situation, but if you can go to someone in the organization who can listen, hopefully leadership, management team, and openly communicate, what do you need? What do you feel? What do you need? What kind of support do you feel is needed here for a better well-being? Please do that. If you can't communicate it openly, you will have to find your resilience in the ways that we have described. And sometimes I would say, and I would say it carefully, sometimes we need to reconsider what is the working environment that we are committed to. I'm not encouraging anyone to leave their workplace tomorrow, just to say, I'm being very careful here, that you need to take responsibility for your decisions. So you either change it by open communication or become more resilient and slowly tap into the system, or take tough decisions when the environment is very, very toxic. And I have noticed, I've been in interaction with some people working in a very, very toxic environment. By the way, especially women, which is our audience today. We don't have to put up with it. We don't have to put up with it. Seriously, I want to say it loud and clear. I'm not encouraging anyone to leave tomorrow. I'm just saying you don't have to put up with bullying or with a toxic working environment.
Yes, thank you for saying that. Sometimes we just have to hear it from other sources and it's really powerful. Do you have any, you kind of mentioned that you get a bunch of questions that people ask you. What's the most common thread amongst the questions that people ask you in regards to burnout?
What's the most common question?
Like the one solution? Are they always looking for the solution?
Usually it's the one solution and the recipe that I've mentioned, that it's never a recipe, it's never a formula. Another question that was interesting lately is, what do we do when we recognize that another person is approaching burnout? Do we intervene there? Do we take a stand? Do we leave it alone? What do we do with that? And I love that question. Sometimes it is a dilemma. Maybe the other person don't want us to interfere there. Or maybe what we can do is turn on this empathy button and not be in a hurry to offer advice, but we can offer support, which is a bit different. We can offer a supportive space to hold the space for this person to first open up to us and share what they're going through. Would they like to talk? Would they like to be heard? What do they need from us? Maybe they say, no, thank you, that's okay. but maybe we just opened the door to some support for this person. So this is about giving empathy and not being in a hurry to, of course, not judge, but also not in a hurry to give advice. And from there, we just help this person to observe herself, himself in that context.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's really beautiful. And we can all find extra places in our hearts for the other people that we work with or we share our lives with. It's difficult to go through life alone. So
we don't have to do it alone. That's the beauty of it. We don't have to do it alone.
So it's nice to be able to bring other people along or to wait patiently when other people might need your help to get them along. So that's wonderful. Thank you for that message, and thank you for all the knowledge and wisdom you shared with us today. It was really, really insightful, and I hope that all of our attendees or viewers and the people who will watch this later on, because this is recorded, will find so much value in the work that you're doing and in what you shared with us today. If you want to learn more about what Davida is doing, she has her contact information. We'll pull up on the screen. Please reach out, connect with her, find her on LinkedIn, and listen to all the powerful messages she has. If you want to stay connected with us, I encourage you to find us at HERdacity.org. I'm super grateful that we had all of your eyes and ears on today, and I look forward to seeing you again next month. We do this on the third Thursday of every month. Again, my name is Lorelei, and this is HERdacity. Davida, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for this invitation.
It's our pleasure, and it's our pleasure to have you all on today, and we will see you next time.